we have a very special guest, Premm from Unruggable, who we're going to be talking about AI identity and some of the work that he's doing. We're also just going to like catch up about in general, like the AI trends, just discuss like what's going on in industry. Again, my name is Kevin. We do this every week on Friday at this exact time. So it's usually 10 a.m. Pacific time. So if you are interested in AI, building an AI, building anything on chain, Ethereum, all sorts of chains we talk about here. And we're very excited to have you here every week. Make sure that you subscribe to the Edgen Node X account and put on notifications so you know when we go live. We also live stream directly to YouTube as well. So if you prefer that, and if you want to watch the replay, this will be available in the feed on both YouTube and on X. So thank you so much for joining, and I'm very excited today. So I guess without further ado, let me bring on Premm. So Premm, it's good to see you. It's been, I don't know, not that long. I think maybe a week I saw you. We were in Denver. So Premm and I met actually at ETH Prague, I believe like last year at the MetaMask Builder event, which was really great. And we were, I was lucky enough to meet him, and like now we have a good relationship. So Premm, why don't you introduce yourself, explain what you're working on, and what you're interested in building.
Sure. Well, maybe we'll just take it one step at a time. So, my name is Prem, and I am a co-founder of Unruggable. And Unruggable is a independent team building ENS, the Ethereum name service. And let's see. Basically, we've worked on a number of projects, and one of the projects that we're working on now is actually working with the Ethereum Foundation to bring all of the chain IDs on chain. So basically, instead of registering chain IDs using the GitHub repo, we have actually created a registry to be able to move those chain IDs on chain, and also include a label. So this would be something like you would send a transaction. Well, you would send funds or make a transaction to, for example, an ENS name at base. So the label would be issued to all the chains, and that's just an example of one of the projects we're working on. We've actually built a bunch of things for ENS, and I'm also very focused on AI and AI identity, which we can talk about more today.
Yeah, yeah, it's an interesting time. Like, there's a lot going on in the space, and there's a lot of like two verticals coming together. I think, like with AI and on-chain activity, like agents are getting wallets. That's very exciting. The work that you're working on. What do you think of the current kind of landscape when it comes to identity, when it comes to wallets? Like, because I often think like, oh, is the wallet the identity, or is like the code for the AI agent it's the identity, and like where is the connect there, and how do we like deal with like the fact that wallets get rotated, right? Like eventually a private key has to die probably. Or it could be like a signer on a multi-sig, or like what are your thoughts in terms of that, and like how identity needs to actually move from wallet to wallet?
Yeah, it gets a little complicated, particularly when you're talking about these multiple entry points or multiple things that are multiple moving pieces when it comes to like quote an identity. But we do have some existing models to work with. So of course my experience for quite a few years now is with ENS. So the Ethereum
Hmm.
name service, there is like a profile. The Ethereum your Ethereum address is part of the profile. And you can also have other addresses. You could have, for instance, a Bitcoin address, or you could have a Solana address included into this single profile. So I do think that in the end, we are talking about sort of more complicated identities that are identity solutions, which would be basically a profile for, say, an agent or a user. I mean,
Hmm.
getting into the very specifics of agents, I think right now we just really don't know what the stack is for building on-chain agents, and that may become more clear in the near future. But there are, I think, many attempts to just to kind of create a persistent identity of an agent that might be something that's thought of as autonomous, like an agent that's just operating on its own, has a wallet address, and can do transactions. But I think in many cases it will actually be something more like what I call a digital twin. So a
Mm,
digital twin is something that is like representing someone or something, particularly someone, and it can do certain things on users' behalf, but it can't do everything.
mm,
So this is kind of creates a kind of sub identity of a human. It's like the agent is a sub identity of their parent owner. So there's many kind of intricacies in the relationships between agents and humans, and how we
mm.
actually build these and then make them work across multiple chains. I think is mostly an open question. I could get into some answers if you want to go like into to different attempts that people are working on.
Yeah, no, feel free to dive into it. Yeah, it's very interesting. I think there's like different patterns. What do you like? What do you think is like the most effective one now, or like what do you think the industry is moving towards? I guess that would be the question.
I do think it's a completely open-ended question, but I think there are some attempts. For instance, the ERC 8004 project, which is a project by the Ethereum Foundation, also MetaMask, also Coinbase, and Google are actually involved in that as well. And that project says that, okay, what if we register agents on chain using an on chain registry? So the 8004 ERC 8004 standard is a standard that's intended to be a registry on every chain, every EVM chain. And I've also heard that Solana has created a version of their own. And the idea is that every agent will have this unique ID registered on chain. And then with that ID, you can actually include the wallet address, you can include the endpoint, and you also have an owner. So I think of it as kind of four pieces. We have the ID from the registration on chain, we have the wallet address, we have the owner, and we have an important endpoint where we can interact with the agent.
Very cool. Very cool. So, given like the current status of like ERC 8004. I know there's a lot of work being done in this kind of like trust layer and like this kind of like more advanced, yeah, kind of like trying to make agents a little more robust and not just like a registry. I think ERC 8004 is currently a registry. So what is some of the work that you're working on that really is going to take it to the next level that you think is like crucial or like, you know, interesting that you're working on?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I think you should kind of zoom out a bit and say, okay, the 8004 is one idea of agent identity. But
Mhm.
in my view, the internet will mostly be what's called like a dead internet. It's like a dead internet theory. The dead internet theory is that like humans won't be using the internet. It will actually be agents and our agents that will be using the internet. And I think we could point to something very simple, like for instance, booking travel, or for example, reading the news. If you're are you going to be going to websites and actually clicking on them and then scrolling them and reading the news, or are we just going to be talking to our agents? The agent's going to be fetching information for us, getting the information for us. So I think a lot of things will change on the internet when we have, particularly these agents, what we call like a personal assistant agent,
Mm.
or something that's basically this like Claude bot type thing. Some people call it like their personal executive assistant.
Mm.
And these agents will be cruising around the internet and interacting with other agents. So then you have something called like agentic economy, where agents interact directly with agents, not necessarily with any human intervention.
Mhm.
So given this framework of like the dead internet, uh, we basically need to enable interactions, because it's like, if you would you pick up your phone if you got a random phone call from a random number, and probably it says this might be spam. So
Mm.
you're going to not take that phone call. So we definitely need to think of identity as an enabler that would allow us to actually uh, do basic things like have book travel, buy tickets to a concert, buy tickets to a movie. In order to do this, we actually have to have a persistent identity for the agents that represent the movie theater, the agents that represent the airlines, the agents that represent any of the services that we interact with now using websites, basically.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's quite it's funny because I'm sure you as well have been doing a lot of like building with like AI tools. And it's like now it's kind of like a whole new thought process to building an application. You're like thinking, okay, well, how is an agent going to interact with this actually? Like we've been like working on apps that are like user friendly for like the longest time, and like been building tools like captchas, to protect against agents, and now we're like, no, but how do we like actually empower the agents to do stuff, right? So it's kind of an interesting like switch, like context switch. And like I'm sure you've been following the molt book stuff, right?
Yes.
And the stuff that they had to do to where it's like how do you actually prove you're an agent? It's like a reverse captcha, This is quite cool. And I'm wondering like where are there some like gaps in the industry right now when it comes to AI and on chain, other than identity? Is there other stuff that you think that needs to be built out to make this like the registry is obviously one, right? Are there any other gaps or like opportunity for builders right now that you think is interesting?
I mean, I would sort of flip that and say that like it's so wide open right now that it's like really almost anywhere is underexplored.
Mm,
Um, but maybe I'll just get back to the identity piece a little bit because I think before you
mhm,
were asking like how does it actually get built? How do you actually
mhm,
build identity for
mhm,
agents? And first thing I think we need to do is we need to develop some terms. Like there are some interesting terms that have been developed or have been proposed and starting to be used. One of them is KYA, which is Know Your Agent. And this helps a lot because now this term, I think it was in the 2026 what we should build for A16Z. Um, this term gives us at least a container to talk about agent identity, and so we have this term KYA. And
mhm,
then you get into the idea of like, okay, what makes sense for KYA? And I think we also need to have some basic goalposts, like, okay, we have succeeded with this level of success once we have made this, achieved this level of complexity or challenge. And what I like to think about is the Uniswap agent. So the
mhm,
Uniswap agent would be a representative of Uniswap, and it would interact with other agents in an agentic environment, agentic economy. It could be on Moltbook or whatever. And the question is, well, what does it do? And in my mind, it replaces the front end of the Uniswap website. I mean, it replaces the Uniswap website, basically. So in the end, the agent is saying, I want to make a swap. My agent is saying, I want to make a swap with the Uniswap agent. First thing it has to do is actually identify, is this the Uniswap agent? Can I trust
mhm,
this agent? Is actually the agent the representative of, say, the official Uniswap company? And in that case, we need something very much like TLS, which is like the signature of the agent, or really it's the signature of it's a chain of trust that starts with a signature. So we wouldn't have to be able to identify the public key, which is the address of Uniswap, of some sort of public address that we can trust. We would look for on the registration, let's say ERC 8004 registration, and see if the endpoint is registered to the agent, registered for the agent by Uniswap. And that would at least start us down the path of saying like, yeah, this is actually the Uniswap organization who has registered this agent. And then we can actually look at different checks. I haven't looked at the spec recently, but there's a well-known endpoint where you can also look on the endpoint of the agent, and it can also kind of verify that the agent has this, that is Uniswap, or is pointing back
mhm,
to the same agent registration. Then the question is like, okay, well, that's fine, but there's an agent that's claiming its ENS name, which is like maybe agent.uniswap.eth. And so we also have to go and double check that and verify that. And that's something, an ENS IP that I proposed called ENS IP25. And ENS IP25 was recently just merged, and it allows for verifying a claim by an agent. And again, an agent in this case is 8004 registered agent of its ENS name. But where I'm sort of leading to is the idea that we have these many verifications that are going to take place because we basically can trust nothing when it comes to agents. We just have to assume that everything is a lie, everything is synthetic. So we have to go through every single interaction and do a check and be able to have some sort of thing, something verifiable about that check. And so what I'm calling that generally is like the verified web. So we basically need to upgrade the entire internet where we don't really trust anything anymore. We just go through many, many steps, looking at one signature, connected to the next signature, connected to the next verification step. And of course, starting with an on-chain registry makes a lot of sense because it's composable and you can add more types of registrations, verifications and checks into the registration.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I could kind of see this as like almost like, yeah, different levels that need to, like, little check boxes. It's like a checklist. Like, okay, I'm going to do this. I need to make sure all of these pass before I go ahead and like make a transaction with this agent or do anything. Like, that's quite interesting. So it's strongly going to be built on cryptography stuff that we already are using, like, you know, ECDSA and ECDH and like private keys. But it's also going to be like this kind of registry thing. And do you think it's like the user is going to control that on their own, or is it going to have to be like a standard? Like, what does that look like? Is it developer focused? Like, I guess the developer probably writes those rules, right? So it's kind of on the developer.
Right. So the question is, I would say what's called the entry point for the agent, and where do we first enter this series of checks and steps that we take in order to comprehend the agent and or to verify the agent. And I think I'm looking at it a few different ways. One is ERC 8004, because let's say that becomes a popular standard. Then we would have people who are indexing 8004. They will be basically, that will be the entry point for some number of agents, or depending upon how it develops. The other entry point I'm looking at is ENS. So the Ethereum name service gives the agent a name that it could use for transacting, but it can also have its own records, text records, data records, content hash record, which is like a website. These are all on chain and verifiable, but they give it a kind of a rich profile, including an avatar record, which would be its image. So if the entry point is ENS, and a good example of where an entry point might be an ENS name is, for instance, in XMTP. So like if you have like an XMTP chat and agents are interacting together like a mult book or something, then basically the first thing you'll see is like the ENS name. And then the question is like, okay, do I want to interact with this agent who's claiming to be agent.uniswap.eth? And then the entry point would be the ENS name and not the 8004 registration. So we do have ENS IP 25, which allows you to go to the ENS name, resolve the registrations in 8004. So it works either way, either from 8004 to the ENS name or ENS name to 8004, depending upon the entry point.
Okay, so does IP25 rely on XMTP for its kind of standard, or is it?
No, I was just
Like
giving an example of
you just give an example
of an
okay.
open protocol where your ENS name might be your first class username. I think also Farcaster has this where you can actually set your username as your ENS name, and there's also other things where your ENS name could be your universal username across the internet, which I think is another goal we could talk about, is the idea of fractured identity and how that could be changed using a kind of Web3 centric universal profile.
Yeah, maybe actually like one of the questions I had that I'm just curious your thoughts on is like, obviously, like I'm very fond of Ethereum. I've been in the Ethereum space for a long time, but maybe like the rest of the world, some of the rest of the world isn't on Ethereum. And so I think we're starting to see agents that are, we have like agents that want to use like Stripe to make payments, for example. There's maybe like less on chain. So like, where's the disconnect there, where it's like we need to have a standard that supports all agents, but it needs to be compatible with something like ENS, which, like, again, I'm a huge fan of ENS. Is there certain things that we need to like consider outside of the Ethereum world, or how much of this do we make it focused on Ethereum with the hopes that it'll be adopted at a more global kind of like non chain specific way? Does that make sense?
Right. I mean, I think that's. I think it's always a challenge. I think it's always a challenge to be, to be building for everything. But it's like kind of like Linux, right? Like Linux, really doubled down on the idea of being, open source, being available to anybody. Anybody can change the operating system to make their own flavor of Linux. But then, of course, the problem you have is that now you have so many flavors of Linux that it's very hard to create front-end apps for Linux because you have to like deploy them to all kinds of different versions. So I think that blockchains are a bit in a similar situation right now, where there's just like different competing ideas of how you build a blockchain. But in the end, there generally tends to be some type of consolidation, I think, eventually. I personally believe that will be the EVM standard, whether it's Ethereum itself or whether it'll be the EVM standard. I generally believe that is probably dominant, and I think that you can see that when it comes to stablecoins. So right now, we have stablecoins mostly on EVM chains, and of course, Stripe is building on the EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine. So I would say that it's likely that the EVM will become a big, important piece of the tech stack for payment and transactions, mainly because of stablecoins. I'd say that stablecoins really are probably what I maybe would call the killer app of to bridge the gap between on-chain native things and Web 2 type applications, because stablecoins really enable basically micropayments. And I think it's going to be clear that micropayments are going to be really important to agents. I think a very good simple example is if you just ask your agent, like, "Hey, what's going on today? What's the news?" If it goes to, for instance, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and maybe 5 different news sources, and it says, "Well, you don't have a subscription for all these news sources," and ask you to sign up for like $50 or $70 a month in news subscriptions. That doesn't seem to make sense when it comes to agents. It seems to make sense that you could micropay for a single news article or API access. And that gets into, of course, X402, which is a new proposed standard to allow for these API requests to be paid in stablecoins in, I think, as low as a hundredth or a thousandth of a cent.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So some of the work that you're doing right now, how far along are you on it? And I guess if you're like a developer and you're building in the agent space and you're very interested in like identity, like this stuff and registries, like first of all, like how far along are you, and like how can developers get involved with the work you're doing, or when the future comes, like when you're like actually get more along, what's kind of like roadmap look like?
Probably I could just go back to like how I started. That might be helpful. In 2021, I was interested in some core concepts which fed directly into my interest in Ethereum, which was the idea of how do you build on-chain communities that are sustainable, that basically sometimes I call unstoppable. It's an on-chain community that is decentralized to the extent that like it just keeps living. It's almost like a nation state, almost like Balaji's idea of nation state. So I was thinking about those ideas all the way back into the early mid 2000s, and when I learned about Ethereum first in 2018, and then took more seriously in 2021, I kind of finally got the idea of Web3. And Web3 to me was like, okay, upgrade the internet to a layer of ownership and decentralization that allows the internet almost to operate like a society, or almost like a state. You can own digital goods, you can have digital identity that's persistent that you own, and then of course you could build communities as well that are persistent and have all these qualities. But of course, that's kind of like a big abstract idea. So when I actually looked at Ethereum and this, I thought, and thinking about Web3, I realized that, okay, we can't build Web3, at least a user-friendly version of Web3, without persistent naming and identity. So the fact that we were using 0x addresses, and basically we still are today, seemed like a major problem to me. It seemed like we just couldn't create this next upgraded internet using
Hmm.
copying and pasting 0x addresses. So I looked around and I tried to understand better what was the naming solution that I thought would be persistent. And of course, ENS jumped out at me fairly quickly. Of course, learned that Vitalik was involved in spinning it out of the Ethereum Foundation. Back when Nick Johnson founded it. And to me, that seemed like very interesting. Okay, we have this naming system. Then I started looking at ENS and trying to figure out, like, okay, can I build these persistent on-chain communities using ENS names? And at that time in 2021, it actually cost around $100 or $150 to register an ENS name. So it was really like, okay, this is not even close to ready. So then
Yeah.
finally, my next inclination was like, okay, what is broken? Maybe I can help fix it. So I think that's basically the user journey that I would recommend for anybody is like take some broad goals that you want to solve, something you want to see that you could imagine being better about the whole internet.
Hmm.
Boil that down into like, okay, what is one practical solution that we can work on here? Whether that's working on DeFi or any kind of problem that seems to be an open problem that people are working on. Then basically pick some type of project, whether it's your own project or some larger project like ENS, and really become an expert in that because that actually gets you to the frontier of the technology and allows you to really invest and learn.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good advice. Yeah, like trying to solve for the problem. And there are some problems in our space that we need to work on. So there's lots of work to be done. So okay, interesting. What are you like most excited for in the AI space or in the Ethereum space right now? I think we're at like an interesting like time where there's a lot of like people focused on enterprise, institution adoption, but there's also a lot of like interesting stuff being built. Vitalik's doing a lot of interesting posts lately, like stirring the pot, I would say. What are you like most excited about, like the current state of Ethereum and AI, and like, yeah, what's kind of going in the future?
Yeah, I think most people are curious and interested to see what's going to happen with this rollout of AI as what I would call like synthetic users. So you,
Mm,
you can if you just think of them as users because we could think of the state of the technology as like, okay, well, they're not really users yet. They kind of do some things, they don't do other things. But if you just kind of like live in about 6 months or even 2 years in the future, it's probably a good idea because basically the technology is advancing really rapidly. And in, I'd say 6 months, probably even 6 months, we will have sort of obvious user activity increasing around agents. And so we can imagine them as kind of like, okay, let's just call them users, but we'll call them synthetic users. So we'll sort of have a slight variation or a slight distinction between like human users and AI users. But I think over time that will even become basically non-existent. Like we'll just think of users as users. Now the question is that right now I'd say the main thing that I'm interested in is like lowering the barrier to embracing synthetic users on the internet. And this seems like kind of 180 from where we were before. Because like Cloudflare, for instance, was just like wanting to block bots. Like that's their whole business was like, just can you keep AI users or agent synthetic users, bots basically from interacting with your websites or messing up your systems. And I think right now everyone's just kind of flipping that on its head and going like, okay, how do we just like accept synthetic users as users of the internet, and how do we like lower the barriers for them to interact with all the different services in a safe and effective way? Just like recently, I think I saw a tweet. Someone said like, if you can't like create a user account using an API, like your software is just out of date. It's just like not keeping up with the times. And I think that's really where we're at right now. It's just like looking at everything, re-engineering everything to be work really well for synthetic users. Oh, you're muted.
thank you. Sorry. It's one of those things, yeah,
No
where we
problem.
need to like flip it on its head, like rethink the way that our brains are normally been thinking for the last 20 years. Okay, that's very exciting. So, yeah, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about in the AI space or in the identity space?
Well, I think in terms of like the actual work that's being done, I'd say that we still don't really have the AI stack yet for on-chain agents, and we still don't have a super compelling. Um, I mean, there is a compelling use case, and I think that's stablecoins because we know that like we're going to have stablecoins for agents
Mhm.
pretty much, unless we're going to be using credit cards forever, which I don't think is the future. So we're going to have to give agents wallets so they can pay for things in stablecoins. Then we're going to have to enable interaction. For instance, like I said with the Uniswap agent, we're going to have to give agents identity. And then I think beyond that, we're going to have to really look at the idea of credentials. And credentials, what I mean is that, humans acquire credentials and they post them on, for instance, their LinkedIn. They might have a university they went to. They might have a nationality, a passport, and these are all things that humans kind of collect in order to be able to basically, I would say, enable interactions. So if you want to apply for a job, you want to enable an interaction with a certain level of sophistication with a employer. You present your credentials, and then they say, okay, you're not spam. You're somebody who has these credentials, and I can interact with you. So I try to think of these things as enablers and not so much as like discriminators. And for agents, the question is, what kind of credentials could we actually imagine? And I think a really simple one would be like a security credential. So you would have a third party who offers to kind of white hat hack your agent. If it can't produce your private key, if it can't re-engineer your, can't prompt inject you, you can't do a long list of things. It could actually issue you your agent a credential. And then the question is, well, how do you tie that credential into the agent and kind of add it to this set of checks that other agents will do when interacting with your agent? And this system I've been working on for a couple of years now, and there's actually an ERC. So the ERC is called ERC 8121. ERC 8121, and that's called hooks. And what hooks does is it allows you to put this reference to a credential into your metadata of your agent. And so it's saying that I have this credential. I can't control the credential. I can't update the credential myself, but I'll point you to where the credential lives. And I think if you go back to our original idea, which is that like we're going to be interacting with other synthetic users, agents, through a series of verifications and checks. And there's not going to be any just trust me. It's going to be 100% based on verifications and checks. And we need to be able to add verifications and checks to the identity of the agent. And that's a recent ERC, which was recently merged, that I worked on, called ERC 8121, I believe,
Nice.
which is
That's
called
awesome.
hooks. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the right one. Yeah, it's I start to lose track of all these ERC numbers and now that EIPs and
Yeah, me too.
it's a tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you work on them. You're like the author.
I know, but I have
so
multiple, so.
yeah.
But yes,
No,
so
that's
I would
awesome.
direct people to check that out. I mean, I would love to get feedback. There is an Ethereum Magicians post on it, and
Hmm.
people can check it out, ERC 8121, and
Hmm.
see if it'll enable what I'm talking about as a verified web. The idea that we're going to just be using checks, checks, and cryptography for almost every interaction, because there really isn't going to be any other way to trust what's on the web except through cryptography. And we haven't mentioned the
Yeah,
word ZK
yeah.
yet. It's almost like a poly market bet. Like, did we mention the word ZK? And ERC 8121 actually it allows for ZK type verifications, which really opens up a huge amount of design space if you can prove off-chain data on-chain. And ERC 8121 kind of allows for that. It's which is kind of different than what people call verifiable credentials.
Interesting. So the ZK. So essentially, you're creating a proof off chain, storing the proof on chain in that ERC 8121. And
Yeah,
is there?
ERC 8121
Mhm,
allows
go
for
ahead.
a lot of flexibility because it
Hmm.
also requires turning on ERC 3668 CCIP read off-chain resolution. And so
Hmm.
it's kind of a technical limitation right now, but ERC 3668, which I think is a very powerful way to fetch data off chain and then verify it on chain is not turned on by default in all the libraries. So what that means is that if you use ERC 3668 in a contract, you can't really guarantee that the off-chain data will be resolved on-chain. You'll get a revert, and then it won't necessarily guarantee, because based on the client. But that's why on ERC 8121, one of the requirements is that the client uses ERC 3668. So you can kind of know at that point, like it's not going to come to your contract and resolve a off-chain data resolution from the original source, which is the hook, because it would already not be following hooks. So it kind of allows this this flow to take place, which I think is extremely powerful. And then you can definitely go fetch a ZK proof and actually verify in real time, or you could do it as a ZK proof that's verified through an attestation, and then just relayed with the hook. So it allows a couple of different patterns. I think it's extremely powerful, and definitely looking for people to give me feedback on it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, this is really good stuff. Okay. Yeah, maybe I just have a random question for you. Maybe we can like wrap up. What are your thoughts about OpenClaw? Like it's gotten some huge traction, and like I don't know if you've used it or if like what your thoughts are on it. But I always like to ask this question on the calls because I have my personal thoughts on it, but I would love to hear yours.
Right. When it first came out, I immediately started trying to download it and get it running. And then I looked at it and it was like, oh, it's going to download 600 packages. And I was like, okay, that's just crazy, 600 packages. So I have to admit, I stopped downloading it, and I was like, okay, I'm going to work on downloading it. I'm going to try like version 2 or 3 when I feel like it's a little more mature. But I think it is what I would call like a ChatGPT moment. I saw somebody on X who said like there was like 3 ChatGPT moments. Like I forget what they were exactly, but definitely let's see, I don't know, maybe some sort of early thing that everybody kind of opened everyone's eyes to, maybe attention is all you need or something, and then ChatGPT, and then OpenClaw. And the reason why OpenClaw I think is kind of like a ChatGPT moment is because it's the personal agent moment. I think before that there wasn't a real focus on having a personal agent like what I call a digital twin or a personal agent. And I think after that, it's very clear that the personal agent stack is what everyone is starting to build right now. I think Perplexity just came out with one yesterday or something. So I think we're going to see in 2026 everybody launch a personal agent, and I think they will actually become very useful, and it will become like the agent moment, whereas before we had the chat GPT moment, but now it's like the agent moment. Agents are really here now.
Interesting. And what about the future? What do you think the future is like? Because I feel like it's really hard to gauge now because everything's moving so fast. But what do you think the next era is? Like we've kind of been leading up to this multi-agent thing, and it's finally kind of starting to get some traction. What do you think the next thing is? Do you think it's like the agentic economy like gets realized, or you think we're still far off from that?
Yeah, so the next era really gets into things that I'm quite interested in building and helpful for. And that is the idea that we take these agents and the users that kind of control them or build them, and we create a new stack for productivity and creativity. So and what's the new stack? It's like a Linux for organizations. It's like, well, we took the idea of a proprietary operating system, a centralized proprietary operating system, and we open sourced it. Well, what if we took the idea of a proprietary centralized organization, which is a company, and we open source it? And it's like, okay, what does that even look like? And I think recently, I think Mark Andreessen even said, like, we don't actually know whether in the future all software will be open source. And the question is like, okay, what if we have these major open source projects that, that like the whole world is using, for instance, like messaging, search, a browser, things like SaaS, and people just start open sourcing this stuff all the time. Every week you'll have a new open source version of some major software package. And then the question is like, okay, that's fine, but we need ways to manage those software packages. And these are software packages, but they're also almost like companies now. And they replace companies basically. And then it's like, okay, I think OpenClaw is a perfect example of that. Like, how could this OpenClaw project be maintained over a long period of time in a sustainable way, using basically the crowd to deploy their agents to continue to build the software? And the answer is like there are some missing pieces that don't exist today. And I think
Hmm.
identity is one for agents, and then the other is creating incentive alignment. So there has to be
Hmm.
some way to be able to get investors to invest in things that actually cost capital, for instance, like servers and things that are real. And then there has to be ways for people to pay for their LLM bills when they're working on open source projects. And I think my view is that it will move away eventually from the like donation and like goodwill side of open source, and will actually
Hmm.
move towards sustainable models of open source. And I call those basically like operator DAOs or persistent, data DAOs. It's going to be some term which I haven't come up with or heard yet, which is basically like a decentralized collective of builders who maintain a significant and serious project. Sometimes call that like, can we build thousands of Wikipedias?
Hmm.
And it's not the Wikipedia itself, but it's like the idea of the crowd coming together, open sourcing something together, building it in a persistent way, and competing with the largest companies in the world. And if I'm right, I think it's possible that in, say, the further future that we're imagining right now, just the idea of a company is something that could be competed with some sort of open source version of a company.
Yeah, yeah, that's so it's so disruptive to think actually. I was listening to a YouTuber like yesterday, the day before, and like he's a big OpenClaw guy, and he was talking about how he like told his agent, he's like, I want you to start like a $1 million company, like that's your goal, right? And like I guess the agent has been he like built a website, built some like content that was like token gated or like I don't know exactly how he did it, but it made like 3,500 bucks. Plus, it
Wow.
launched its own. Yeah, it made 3,500 bucks, and it also launched its own token, which I know a lot of
Yeah.
people are launching tokens uh, for their AI agent, and it like is like managing the supply. It's like burning supply to make sure it doesn't have like more than 10%, and like it's like operating kind of as a company, because it's
Yeah.
technically it's taking equity from the token, and it's using that token to like pay for its inference and operating costs, which whatever that is. But so it's so weird. Yeah, it's so disruptive because AI is like really, really poised to like take jobs, but also empower the people that know how to use the technology to do some crazy stuff. So it's very exciting. It's very exciting times.
Yeah, I mean, I try to be optimistic because might as well imagine the future that we want, and then just go about building it. And
Yeah.
I do think that we could call it maybe orchestration is just
Hmm.
a topic for 2026. How do we bring together these productive units of productivity, which would be like just agents, and
Hmm.
make them work together and cooperate? And incentives are going to be a really important part of that. I think right now the crypto gets a really bad name for like just launching tokens on everything and anything. But I think tokens actually eventually could be used as a kind of primitive to design incentive alignment, such that
Hmm.
basically like Wikipedia editors, you don't have to be like, are you like, is it your reputation that we're looking at, or are we just looking at exactly what you produce? So if like a
Hmm.
Wikipedia editor or somebody, I think in the past it was more open, but maybe it's more closed now for Wikipedia. But if you can like bring something to the equation, you can like improve something about the open source software. There could be a team of agents or other agents that just like watch what is being improved about the software and just assess it and then just credit it with some type of like a token allocation or something. And I think if we
Yeah.
can get the incentive alignment right, I don't see why swarms of thousands of agents couldn't outcompete really big companies with with this model. I mean, it seems possible.
Yeah. Yeah. This is great. I always love talking to you. You're very knowledgeable in the space. You're doing some great work. Thank you so much for making the time. It's always my pleasure to talk with you. Where can people go to learn about you and learn about Unruggable and some of the work you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Our website is unruggable.com. That has some links to some of the things we're working on. My handle on various platforms, including GitHub and X, is NXT3D. no E, NXT3D. And that would probably be the easiest way. Check out X and check out our website. Check out ENS if you're not familiar with ENS, and there's some interesting things going on there. And then check out the ERC 8004 project. I think there's a Telegram. I think it has a bunch of people in there, Builder Telegram channel, and I'd say those are some pretty good places. There's also a Telegram channel for ENS and AI. We have 100 people in there, and we are having weekly meetings, and that's on Telegram as well. Send me a DM to I guess my DMs are open, and send me a DM if you want to join that Telegram channel as well.
Awesome. That's really great. Well, thanks so much, Premm. Again, I appreciate your time. And yeah, everyone out there, please follow Premm, follow Unruggable, follow the EdgeNode GitHub, the EdgeNode X account and the GitHub. We're doing lots of cool stuff with AI, and we're excited to have you on every week. So please tune in. And again, thank you so much, Premm, and hope you all have a nice day.
Thank you. It was a blast. Thank you.
Thank you.